Protection warriors are rock-hard colossi that basically use a weapon and shield to protect their allies. In patch 11.0 Season 1 of the War Within, I'm going to show you everything you need to know to succeed in this class and spec, and it will be beginner-friendly while also showing you everything you need to know, so it's also veteran-friendly as well. So let's get straight into it with the stat priority that we're going to be going with. First up, our primary stat we're getting on our armor and weapons is, of course, strength. The more we get, the more damage we will do, and it's going to increase our parry chance. Parry basically being a chance to dodge attacks. Now, the main way we're going to get strength is a higher and higher eye level or item level on our gear. I wouldn't actually worry too much about the secondary stats and what order or what priority you're getting them in, unless you're looking at the same eye level comparison. Higher eye level gear is always, or 99% of the time, always going to be better. So if you are a beginner, don't worry too much about that. We then have stamina, increasing our health and how sturdy we are, and armor, reducing how much damage we take. Going on to the secondary stats, we've got haste. It's actually going to increase the speed at which we attack our enemies. So rather than hitting them like that, we're going to be hitting them like that. Crit. Of course, giving us a chance at doing more damage, but also actually increasing our parry chance as well. Versatility is actually the same no matter what class and spec you play. It increases damage done, it increases healing done, and it reduces damage taken. Mastery is individual to every class and spec, and as a protection warrior in the War Within, our mastery is critical block. Increases your chance to block, and your chance to critically block, where you basically block by twice the amount. And it also increases our attack power, which is pretty straightforward as a tank. The priority that you generally do want to go for, if you are interested, is this here on screen now. We then have things like Leech, where when you do damage, we get some health back. Dodge, which, you can dodge, which is similar to parry. And while we're here, let's just look at the set bonus that we are getting in Season 1. Again, if you're a beginner and you don't know what these abilities are, don't worry. I'm going through them in full later in this video to give you a full understanding. Set bonus for 2-piece then. When your shield slam cooldown is reset by strategist, you gain expert strategist, increasing the damage of all shield slams by 5% and reducing damage taken. So basically on the 2 set, within the rotation, we'll be increasing damage done and reducing damage taken. Pretty nice. And then the 4 set, Shield Slam critical strikes increase the damage dealt by Thunderclap and Revenge by 10% for 8 seconds. And when we look through the hero talents, you'll see this is going to come in very, very handy. So now we're going to look through some of the utilities and defensives that you have available to you as a warrior. And yes, that does mean these are going to be available in any spec you want. So do check out the playlist on my channel because I have done all warrior specs for you. Now there are, of course, always going to be more utilities that you can use. Each class has quite a lot of them, but these ones are the most important ones, or the kind of ones you're going to use the most. And I do always recommend that once you're familiar with the game or with your class or spec, etc., that you go into the spellbook and just have a look through at what else you do have available. So the ones I want to talk through with you today are first Pummel. Pummel's the target, interrupting spell casting and preventing any spell in that skill from being cast. So if your enemy is casting a spell, you can see here that Boomkin was casting Full Moon, and now they're casting Sunfire. Well, basically, that's going to interrupt that spell cast. It's otherwise known as a kick. Kick or interrupt is what it's known as in World of Warcraft. And that is a really, really useful ability, especially in, PvP, especially in Mythic Plus. You're going to be doing a lot of interrupting wherever possible, and it is only on a 15-second cooldown. Then we have Piercing Howl, snares all enemies within 12 yards, reducing their movement speed by 70% for 8 seconds. A massive slow that we can put on nearby enemies. Then we have Hamstring here. It's going to cost you 10 rage, which is our main warrior resource, maims the enemy for X amount of damage, reducing their movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. Again, another slow that we can use on our enemy. Over on the right, then, we've got some things that are more affecting us and our allies in a positive way. The first up being Bitter Immunity on a 3-minute cooldown. Restores 20% of your health instantly and removes any diseases, poisons, or curses that are affecting you. So if someone poisons you, you can press this button, restore some health, and just wipe out that poison immediately. A really great defensive cooldown we have there as a warrior. Rallying Cry. Let loose a Rallying Cry, granting all party or raid members 10% temporary and maximum health for 10 seconds, boosting up our raid, party, and ourselves with more health. If you know the boss or whoever you're fighting is going to do a big, massive old damage cooldown, this could really help bump up your health temporarily and increase your kind of resistance against that boss. And then we have Battle Shouts. This has been around for a long time, but it's still, of course, here in the War Within. Increases the attack power of you, your party, and raid members by 5% for a whole entire hour. You should always be using this at all times. You can see it on the buff bar up here. It's up for an entire hour, simply increasing our attack power by 5%. You know, warriors and any other kind of classes that go off attack power are going to benefit massively from this buff that we as a warrior can bring to the table. And those are the main cooldowns and sort of utilities and defensives that we can use as a warrior. Again, if you are a complete beginner, do look through the spellbook here once you're more comfortable with the spec and rotation and see what else we have available. All of these will be coming from the warrior tree. So if you're not actually sure, on the right here we have the fury tree, and then on the left we have the warrior tree. Now, ignore this one on the right. This isn't actually set up for any guides or anything. This is just a template to show you the warrior tree. But the warrior tree on the left will not change in any spec. So if you are in arms, fury, or protection, this warrior tree over here will always be the same. You can, of course, change your talents depending on which spec you are in, though. But you do have access to all of these, no matter the specialization you are currently in. And now for the actual exciting part, which is, of course, the rotation we're going to be using as a protection warrior in the War Within. It will be for M+, and also raid. And we are going to be going with Mountain Thane. Now, the two builds are extraordinarily similar, and you can use pretty much the same rotation in all single target and area of effect or multiple enemy situations. So when you first go into battle, we are going to want to use these two abilities. We're first going to use Ravager, throwing a swirling blade at the target location that chases your nearby enemies, inflicting damage to anyone in that area, enemies that is, and dealing reduced damage beyond 8 targets. It'll generate 10 rage every time it deals damage, which is our main resource as a protection warrior in the War Within. After that, we're going to use Charge to quite literally charge into battle. And then, after that, we're just going to go through the normal rotation and priority list. So, the first thing we're going to do on cooldown is use our avatar. Transform into a Colossus for 20 seconds, causing you to deal 20% increased damage and removing all roots and snares. Then we're going to maintain our shield block. Raise your shield, blocking all melee attacks against you. These blocks can be critical blocks, while increases shield slam damage by 30% while active. So while shield block is active, your shield slam ability here is going to have its damage increased by a whopping 30%. After that, we're going to use our Demoralizing Roar, and you can pretty much use this on cooldown as well. You're going to demoralize all enemies within 15 yards, reducing the damage they deal to you by 25% for 8 seconds, and that generates as well 30 rage. It is on a 45-second cooldown, so it's not always going to be up, but any damage reduction, of course, as a tank is going to be good. Now, you can see here that we are capping out our rage, and this is not something you want to do. You want to always be generating rage and spending it so that we don't overcap and waste any. The main way that you can use your rage to dump it, if you will, is using this ability here, Ignore Pain. Fight through the pain, ignoring 50% of damage taken, up to 1.7 million total damage prevented. And this is going to cost 35 rage and is therefore a fantastic rage spender. Then we have, on another 1.5 minute cooldown, Champion's Spear. You can throw this spear, as you can see, chaining your enemies, dealing damage over a few seconds. And this will also generate 20 rage. Now, you'll notice that Ravager is also on a 1.5 minute cooldown. If you can, it'd be really good to pair Ravager and Champion Spear together to maximize the damage you do. Then you can see that we have Thunderclap. Now, because of our hero talents, it's not actually going to be Thunderclap we're using at this point. It's going to be Thunder Blast. Shield Slam and Bloodthirst have a chance to grant you Thunder Blast, stacking up to 2 charges. Your next Thunderclap becomes a Thunder Blast that deals a massively increased amount of damage as Storm Strike and generates 10 Rage as well. And this is your Shield Slam here. Basically, whenever you use your Shield Slam, and then you see, there we go, Thunder Blast proc, you are going to want to use it. And then it will turn back into your normal Thunder Clap. After that, we're going to use Shield Charge and Shield Slam on cooldown. Shield Charge is where you charge an enemy with your shield, dealing physical damage, and physical damage to all enemies within 10 yards, and it also stuns the primary target, and also generates 40 Rage. Again, do be careful not to cap out on your Rage. Use Shield Slam again on cooldown. This is going to generate more Rage as well, slamming the target with your shield, doing physical damage. And remember, after using Shield Block, the damage of Shield Slam will be increased by 30%. Lastly, we can use our Thunderclap, just the normal version, on cooldown, blasting enemies within 12 yards for damage and reducing their movement speed. And specifically here, if you have Rend, Thunderclap affects 5 nearby targets with Rend as well. So you can see on the target here, Rend, bleeding for X amount of damage every few seconds, and Thunderclap will apply that bleed onto the nearby targets that it does hit. Lastly, we have Revenge, swinging a wide arc, dealing damage to all enemies in front of you. Your successful dodges and parries have a chance to make your next Revenge cost no Rage whatsoever, and that will be happening passively. And lastly, we're going to use Execute only if we've got 4 or less targets. Attempt to finish off a foe, causing a huge amount of damage based on the rage spent. Only usable on enemies, however, that have less than 20% health. And that is pretty much the main rotation we are going to be using as a protection warrior. Left is the highest priority, right being the lowest priority. So just remember, use your rage on Ignore Pain, keep things like Demoralizing Shout on cooldown, use your shield block and Avatar on cooldown, using any Thunder Blast charges that you do get from procs, use your Champion Spear on cooldown and try and pair it with Ravager where you can, and then using pretty much everything else on cooldown as needed, etc. and as appropriate. And here's a free Revenge proc you've got there. And now we're going to look through the hero talents that we are taking in the War Within. So for this build, we are going with Mountain Thane. I love Mountain Thane. And I do just want to say, the rotation I've already shown you, these hero talents are included into that. So if you are a beginner watching, don't be like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed, this is all ridiculous. This is more just so you get a bit more understanding into what we're doing in the rotation, and the hero talents and how they make a play into that. So we start off with Lightning Strikes. Damaging enemies with Thunderclap, Revenge or Execute has a chance to strike one with a lightning bolt dealing damage, and may occur a lot more often when we're using our Avatar cooldown. So that's really, really cool. Storm Strike or Nature Damage, your abilities deal, is increased by 5%, and Storm Strike damage ignores armor. Thunderclap damage is increased massively. Seismic Reverberations now affect Thunderclap in addition to Whirlwind. Then we have Thunder Blast. Shield Slam and Bloodthirst have a chance to grant you Thunder Blast, which can stack twice. What does Thunder Blast do? Your next Thunderclap becomes a Thunder Blast, dealing 40% increased damage as Storm Strike and generating some rage for us. And then we have a first choice node on the left. Flashing Strikes. This is what I like to go for, where Thunder Blast calls down a Lightning Strike on an enemy it hits. In the middle, Ground Current. Lightning Strikes deal damage to enemies near their target. And then we've got another choice node. I go for Storm Bolts. Storm Bolt also hits 2 additional nearby targets, stunning them, but the cooldown is increased. And then again, Gathering Clouds. Your attacks trigger Lightning Strikes a lot more often. Strength of the Mountain. Shield Slam damage is increased, and Demoralizing Shout reduces damage enemies deal to you by an additional 5%. Really nice there. Another choice node, I like to go for Steadfast as the peaks, mainly because it's giving you a 5% stamina increase, which I just think is always great. Victory Rush increases your maximum health by 10%. When this health increase expires, you heal for any amount of the original Victory Rush that healed you in excess of your full health. So you're basically just not wasting any of that health, is what that is saying. And then Burst of Power. Lightning Strikes have a chance to make your next 2 Shield Slams have no cooldown. And lastly, Avatar of the Storm. Casting Avatar grants you 2 charges of Thunder Blast and resets the cooldown of Thunderclap. So it's your enhanced version of Thunderclap, and you can use it instantly, 2 charges, whenever you go into Avatar. When your Avatar is not active, Lightning Strikes have a 10% chance to grant you Avatar for 4 seconds. This I love. Avatar is obviously, you know, a big cooldown that we use, and it works well with the whole lightning build of Mountain Thane. So when we're not in Avatar, it can feel, or could feel like, oh, right, well, it's a bit boring when we're not in the cooldown. That's why it's so nice that Lightning Strikes have a chance to grant you Avatar when they happen, and which is why I like things like Flashing Skies and, you know, where we're getting as many Lightning Strikes as possible to basically get into Avatar as much as we physically can. Again, on Thunder Blast here, your next Thunderclap becomes a Thunder Blast. Oh my God, so much thunder. Your next Thunderclap becomes a Thunder Blast that deals Storm Strike damage. When we're in Avatar or out of Avatar? I actually am getting like so confused over this talent. Yeah, when we cast Avatar, the next one is going to automatically become a Thunder Blast. Okay, right. I confused myself for a second. But that is Mountain Thane. For the consumables and enchants, etc., that we're going to be using, the first thing first is that we can now get Nerubian Gem Weavers. This is how we're going to get extra slots on our gear from the weekly vault, and you can put that on your head, wrist, and belt. On the cloak, we're going to put Chant of Winged Grace, giving avoidance and reducing fall damage. On the chest, it's Crystalline Radiance, giving primary stat. On the wrist, it's Armored Avoidance, great for tanking. Stormbound Armor Kit, giving primary stat on your legs. Defender's March on the boots. I would go for versatility on your rings, depending what you need more as a secondary stat, especially if you're simming, could change this, but I do always like in tanking, just getting a bit of extra versatility to increase damage done and also reduce damage taken. I think you can never go wrong with that. And for the weapon, whether you are a tank with a two-hander or dual-wielding tanks, I do think Authority of the Depths is always going to be the best weapon enchant for you in Season 1 of The War Within. What this does is, when you're doing damage, it will sometimes do big shadow damage to your enemy, and that can stack 3 times. For the actual consumables you're going to be using, generally, again, I would go for the Tempered Versatility Flask, again, giving you a good all-round. Feasts are fantastic, of course, for primary stat. Tempered Potions basically will give you massive increases to your secondary stats that you don't get from your flask. So everything but versatility. Algari Healing Potions, and then Whetstones. There's 2 different ones depending on obviously what tank you are. If you're using sword, axes, polearms, maces, staffs, and fist weapons, then you can use, there's 2 different ones to choose from there. Crystallized Augment Runes will give you primary stat. And finally, on your on your sockets, you're going to go with the Culminating Blasphemite. It's going to increase primary stat and give you more crit effect depending on how many different coloured gems you're using, like sapphires, onyxes, emeralds, and rubies. You want 1 of each colour at least to get the full effect from the epic gem. Thank you so much for watching this guide. I hope it was really useful for you in The War Within Season 1, whether it was for Mythic Plus or raiding. If you do have any questions, I'll be happy to help. My Patreon is in the description below, and that is where you can find my LVUI profiles, which I'll show you in a second. And also, I'm putting together a huge macro list for every single spec that's going to be really useful for you in The War Within as well. I am doing all classes and specs for The War Within, so if you are new to the channel, then please do click this playlist here to check out what else I have, which is all of them. There will also be PvP guides on this channel as well for War Within Season 1, so make sure to look out for that. This here is the UI that I was referring to. As you can see, we've got target frames, etc., left and right, and raid frames go in the middle here, and then weak auras in the middle with an action bar down here. Chat is behind where my camera is. Minimap and details, etc., are here on the right. All of the plater profiles, the voodoo, the LVUI, etc., details profile has all been made by me. And again, you can get this on my Patreon should you like it.